Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so we are covering Beta Ray Bill Godhunter. And the reason why we're covering this is after finishing Thor issue number 3, a lot of people were asking about the history that we had kind of discussed between Beta Ray Bill and Galactus, like why Beta Ray Bill hates Galactus so much. And so I figured we'd cover this, right? I mean, the story's out there. So instead of just being like, once upon a time in this video that has nothing to do with this story happened and then let's move on now. Instead of doing that, I figured we will go ahead and actually cover the story itself, right? So a couple things to know. The first is the origin of Beta Ray Bill, and the second is why we basically have this story in the first place. As most of you guys know by doing your own research, probably either because of what we've talked about or when the whole news was dropped about Christian Bale possibly playing Beta Ray Bill, the idea is that Bill is part of a race called the Corbinites, but he's basically a cyborg, right? He was engineered for the purpose of protecting the Corbinite race after they left their planet when it was destroyed by Surtur and his forces. And so ultimately they ended up just kind of being a nomadic race that just traveled from one location to the next for quite some time. Now, along the way, the ship's scuttlebutt and the Corbinites had stumbled across Earth, which led to Thor basically being sent out to investigate by Nick Fury. And that's when Bill was activated. That's when you got the original appearance of Beta Ray Bill in Marvel Comics. And then a kind of camaraderie was formed between the two groups after that. Now, later on down the line, and actually in a story called Stormbreaker, the saga of Beta Ray Bill ends up finding a new home called New Corbin for the Corbinite race. They end up settling there. And then Galactus shows up. It's like the worst luck ever, right? Like, we finally found our home. Oh my God, Galactus is gonna destroy our world. And basically it happened when Beta Ray Bill was actually off planet, right? He wasn't on New Corbin at the time. And so this basically took place as part of a new herald named Stardust coming on board. And so during that story, essentially Galactus consumed and destroyed the world of New Corbin, basically leaving Beta Ray Bill as the last of the Corbinites. And so because of that, he's kind of sort of had in the back of his mind this idea of going on a campaign to take out Galactus, right? To rid the universe of Galactus for what it was that he'd done. And that's why he's here talking to Thor, because the idea is to get Thor to come along. Now, the response of Thor is interesting here, and it actually makes sense, but we also sort of have to understand what's going on with this character at the time. At this point in Thor's comic book continuity, he's been banished from Asgard. And the reason why comes out of Thor issues 600 and 601 by J. Michael Straczynski, kind of the ending of his Thor run. And the idea was that Loki had basically found a way to bring Bor to the modern age, right? Now, Bor, of course, is the father of Odin, the grandfather of Thor. And at the end of that story, basically Thor ended up killing Bor. But because of the fact that he had killed a king of Asgard, the price for doing that is banishment, regardless of what the motivations of Bor were or any of that. And so with that in mind, this basically led to Thor in his current place where his power is a little bit reduced. And so even if he did want to join Beta Ray Bill, he really wouldn't be able to do a whole lot there, right? There wouldn't be a whole lot that he could offer in this particular circumstance. And so as a result of that, you end up having Beta Ray Bill, who basically undertakes the mission on his own. And the first person he visits is Abigail Brand. Now, for those of you guys who are not familiar with her character, we'll go ahead and explain it here. If you are familiar, bear with me for a second. But Abigail Brand, at least if you go and you read Marvel Comics right now, Alpha Flight, at least I'm not really familiar with Captain Marvel. I haven't read her comics for a little while, but I believe she's still the head of Alpha Flight. Before her, it was Abigail Brand. And it wasn't really even called Alpha Flight, it was just called SWORD, the Sentient World Observation and Response Department, and it operated on a space station called the Peak. Now, Abigail Brand was introduced as part of Joss Whedon's run on Astonishing X-Men in the first volume, and the reason why she's the head of SWORD is because if SWORD is an organization like S.H.I.E.L.D., except it exists to monitor other extraterrestrial planets and races and so on and so forth out in space, then Abigail Brand was the perfect choice for it because she has the ability to basically speak and understand every language in existence, right? And so because of that, she's the one that basically runs the show here. Now, as part of Marvel, I guess all new, all different Marvel or whatever it was, Carol Danvers ended up taking over as director of SWORD and then rebranded it into Alpha Flight. And then Abigail Brand, I don't even know what she's doing anymore. I have no clue. But regardless, the reason why Beta Ray Bill's here is because Abigail Brand would know, or at least have some rumorings on where Galactus has been sighted, right? Because while she's not able to keep a perfect eye on him because the resources of SWORD are finite, meaning they can't really see to the other side of the universe. But basically, like, Galactus was sighted in this location like 3 days ago. Now, he is given a bit of a mission to track down a guy by the name of Voidian. He's not really important, right? Like, Voidian appeared as part of the Secret Invasion Aftermath, a story called the Garden Eden, I think is what it was. Basically, he ended up traveling to this place where you had this race called the Remnants, who were like, anybody who wants wants to come hang out is welcome. He reprogrammed a whole bunch of them. He said he was here to bring annihilation or whatever it is, and then told them to go build some god in a pocket dimension or something along those lines. And that was it, right? I mean, the guy was nowhere, he was not very important at all. But he is on Sword's radar, and Sword is, you know, asking Beta Ray Bill to bring him in. And really, his involvement here is just for the sake of the story. It doesn't really matter. But you end up having Beta Ray Bill who shows up here and absolutely starts wrecking the whole place. And then you have basically him taking Voidian hostage, and that's basically it. From there, you jump to a planet called Ethan, I think is how it's pronounced. I'm not really sure if it's an L or an I, but anyway, it's the 9th planet in the system. And the result is that basically you have Stardust here as a herald of Galactus, essentially saying like Galactus is coming, he's going to consume everything. And then you have the starships who basically flee. Now, this was a big difference between Stardust and like the Silver Surfer, for example. The Stardust believes that it's one of these things where like it's an honor for a race to die at the hands of Galactus and have their world consumed. For Silver Surfer, it was, if we can find an uninhabited world that can sustain life, we'll consume that. But if there is life on that world, at least give me time to allow them to get off the world. But Stardust wasn't really that way. Stardust was a lot more intense and a lot more hardcore than Silver Surfer was. And so tracking down Galactus to this location, ultimately Beta Ray Bill jumps in and basically saves some of this race to keep them from being killed, and then basically buys them the time they need to essentially leave. Now, the other part of this is that in response to everything that's going on, he immediately goes and attacks the Herald, right? Because Stardust views Beta Ray Bill's actions as you're intervening with divinity, is really what it is, right? You're intervening with the divine role of Galactus. And that's kind of why it's interesting, because it can sort of go either way, depending on who you are. And there aren't really any Galactus cults, right? There aren't really any cults in Marvel Comics that I'm aware of people who are just like hoping Galactus comes to their world to consume it, or like figures out where Galactus is going to go next and then lands on the world to be consumed with it. But it would make sense that there are beings out there that view Galactus as kind of like a divine entity, because in a lot of ways he is, right? He's an essential part of the Marvel cosmology. He has to exist. He's a necessity when it comes to the cosmic abstracts that exist out there. And so with that being the case, it kind of makes sense that Stardust would basically adopt this sort of divine perspective of Galactus, right? Like to defy the will of Galactus is to like define the will of God, or to define the will of the universe. But basically what he ends up doing here is basically taking the entire armament of Voidian and then channeling it down onto the planet, and then obliterates the entire planet. And this is the plan of Beta Ray Bill. His plan is to literally follow Galactus to every single world he's going to go to and destroy it before Galactus can, to basically starve Galactus out. Now, the immediate question to ask here is, well, then why wouldn't Galactus just destroy him? And Kieran Gillen kind of plays it fast and loose. The story has some major plot holes, right? I mean, it has some major issues. I mean, the response of Galactus is to tell the Silver Surfer, go and find that guy, right? Like, go and find them and bring an end to this so I don't have to worry about it. In any normal circumstance, Galactus, if he'd figured out what it was that Beta Ray Bill was going to do, probably would have just wiped him from existence, right? I mean, Galactus has cosmic awareness. If his heralds came back and said, okay, so the idea of Beta Ray Bill is to destroy every world you're going to go to and wipe it out before you can consume it, then Galactus would just search the spaceways for Beta Ray Bill. When he found him, bring him to him, and then just destroy him, and then there's no more problem anymore. That's all there is to it. That would be the initial response. And that's one of the reasons why when the story came out, people were just kind of like, I don't know if I can get behind this, but it is kind of an interesting concept, right? Because what the Ethan people end up doing is traveling to a new world they refer to as Ethan Prime, a new place of seclusion. And the reason why they consider themselves a secluded people really comes to bear when you have a fight between the Silver Surfer and Beta Ray Bill. Now, this is kind of something to point out here, is that over the years, and in Marvel Comics, depending on what era you're talking about, characters' powers can wax and wane, and they can shift, right? It's the nature of things. But if we were looking at like old school Silver Surfer, this fight would have been over like that. Like it would have been over so fast, because Beta Ray Bill never would have stood a chance against Silver Surfer if he had been like back then, right? But such as it is, the fight's relatively even between the two. Now, there also does appear to be some holding back just because of the fact that Silver Surfer's kind of like, I really don't want to kill you because we've been friends, we fought together. And that's true. This story came out in 2009. And so this is after both individuals were part of the, oh my God, what is that group? Not the Invaders, not the Infinites. What is the name of that group? The super powerful superhero team. Oh my God. Okay, Gordon, do not delete this. All right, I'm gonna try to figure this out. I'm trying to remember it. I feel like fans watching this video are just like, it's this, Rob. It's this. You know, we're just like screaming into their monitors. What is the name of that team? It was Gladiator. We said it the other day. It was like Gladiator, and it was Silver Surfer, and it was Nova, and it was, oh my God, what were they called? What was the name of that team? It's gonna drive me insane. The Annihilators. That's what it was. The Annihilators. Oh my God. Okay, cool. I got it right. I thought I was gonna lose my mind. But they were both part of the Annihilators at one point, right? So like, and even before that, they have history together. So it's not like one of these things where it's just like, you're defying the will of Galactus and our friendship goes out the window and now you gotta die. It's nothing really like that. We've been friends. Like, I really don't want to fight you because you're a friend of mine. But it's kind of a cool thing because the Silver Surfer tries to reason with Beta Ray Bill, you know, and he even says like, I understand loss. I understand where you're coming from, right? The actions of Galactus led to the total annihilation of your people. I understand where that's from. Believe me, very few people better than me understand that. But the response of Beta Ray Bill is, I don't care. And so as a result of that, Scuttlebutt ends up launching an attack, or at least sort of knocking Silver Surfer out temporarily, which gives Beta Ray Bill the ability to hop on board and then race to Zethan Prime, basically, you know, to Ethan Prime, and then catch up with Galactus before, or at least get there before Galactus intends to consume the world. And so when Beta Ray Bill arrives there, he immediately starts talking to the Ethan people, and that's when we learn what was going on, right? That they are an exceedingly old race. They're by no means the oldest, but they're an exceedingly old race. And like most races, most cultures that existed out there, they initially were like really primitive and waged war over stupid things. And so the result of that is eventually they rose to a point where they realized how dumb all of this was and ended up basically removing and really kind of altering their very nature so that their desire was to basically become secluded, to eliminate their warrior prospects, and then in turn become a peaceful race that really focused on space exploration. The result of that is that in everything that's gone on, what they've done is they've kind of tapped back into their warrior side again. And the response of Beta Ray Bill is, you don't want to do this, right? Like, I get you guys want to fight. I get that you guys want to fend off against the forces of Galactus and his heralds, but understand this. You guys need to leave the planet. You guys have to leave this place. If you stay here, you're going to die. You have neither the ability nor the power to destroy or even get Galactus to leave, right? Because sometimes it's not really even about destroying Galactus. It's about making his conquest of your world more trouble than it's worth, right? If it's one of these things where it's like, okay, it's a pain in the ass to basically consume your world, I'm gonna go somewhere else, right? That's if you can do that, which is basically what Earth has done multiple times, then Galactus will just go elsewhere. But his response is, you're not even powerful enough to do that, right? I mean, you guys are ants in the eyes of this, you know, cosmic entity. There's nothing you can do. And so Voidian ends up chiming in for a moment. And then when he does, you end up picking up the next morning with Beta Ray Bill coming out and having infected the entirety of this population with this kind of nanovirus, basically says, this is a cure that I have here at my side. Leave this world and only then will you get this cure. Now, this is pretty intense and it's pretty crappy, right? The idea that he's basically blackmailing these people. Now, in the end, Beta Ray Bill is doing it because he believes he's doing the right thing. The question is he actually doing the right and the honorable thing, right? Is that actually the right thing to do? The culture ultimately does flee. They do end up leaving their planet. They do end up evacuating, and Beta Ray Bill destroys the world. But the measurement as to whether or not he's doing something that's honorable comes when he goes to pick up Stormbreaker, and he can't. He loses the ability to lift his own hammer. Basically, he's fallen down the path of a villain. That's really what this is, right? It's not really about what he's done. It's the path that he's on, leading to what he will do. And that's what makes this matter so much, because what we end up doing is jumping forward by a short period of time, and Galactus is almost knocking on death's door, right? He's not really been able to consume any kind of life energy. His energies itself are already running exceedingly low. And so as a result of that, we end up learning that, of course, the forces of the Zethan are kind of bulking up, right? Like one half of the group is maintaining its somewhat secluded nature, and the other half are marshaling their forces, all for the purpose of tracking down and destroying Galactus. While all that's been going on, Beta Ray Bill has been tracking them everywhere they go. Every time they go to a new world, Beta Ray Bill is right behind them and he destroys it before they can consume it, right? Every single time without fail. And so ultimately, Galactus kind of pulls Silver Surfer aside and says, here's what we're gonna do. And so you end up having Silver Surfer, who shows up, goes to this kind of unexplored system where there's really nothing there, and then kind of calls a sort of parlay with Beta Ray Bill and says, here's what's going on, man. Like Galactus, the reason why he's doing this is because, you know, one, he has to. It's the role he plays. He doesn't want to. He hates it as much as anybody else does. Do not be mad at him for doing what he does. It's like being angry at a rainstorm, right? It's just the natural order of things. But at the end of the day, Beta Ray Bill does not care. It doesn't matter to him, right? It's kind of like, this is my vendetta against Galactus. I'm going to starve him out. This is the price he pays for destroying my people and countless other people across the cosmos. At the same time, the Zethan people basically start marshaling all their forces together, right? And when they do, they kind of have this insanely vast armada, right? Because what we end up learning is that they never really destroyed their systems of weapons manufacturing, right? The weapons they had, the giant space station they had, they never got rid of it, right? It was all still there. The result here is that they really just kind of like dug it all back up and then in turn went back out and they've kind of been tracking or been looking for Galactus ever since, right? So it's an astronomically massive force. And so what they do when they finally track down Galactus, they immediately go and start launching their attacks. And initially you end up having the various heralds who are here who are trying to defend things off as best as they possibly can. But at the end of the day, none of it really seems to make a difference. And the reason why is because what you end up having is this massive kind of device that's basically used by these forces to basically blast Galactus, right? To kind of blast him repeatedly and ultimately try to destroy him due to him being so incredibly weak. But what Beta Ray Bill basically comes to understand here is that he really is fighting against Entropy here, right? He might as well be fighting the universe. That's really what it is. He's fighting a role. He's fighting a concept. He's fighting an ideology, which you can never really succeed in doing. And so understanding this and coming to this realization that really it has all been for naught, that he really has kind of lost his way, that ultimately he ends up siding against Galactus. But as a cyborg, what he does is he basically tells his ship to basically unlatch him, to let him go do his thing. And what this means is it'll essentially allow Beta Ray Bill to kind of push his power to the extreme and basically, almost something akin to like self-destruct, which is really kind of the idea here, right? To allow all these forces to bombard down on Galactus. And then in turn, when that happens, the energies of Beta Ray Bill combined with the energies of these explosions allows Galactus to basically feed on the immediate area. And when he does, he's right back at his full strength and then immediately incinerates all the Ethan people, right? They're all just like gone, destroyed, dead. And that's basically it. And then from there, you get this really amazing conversation between Galactus and Beta Ray Bill. And under any normal circumstance, Galactus would have just incinerated this guy. But the question is, I need to know why this guy was doing this in the first place. And Beta Ray Bill basically says, because you destroy the last of my people, you'll never understand what it's like to basically be the last of your people, to know that everything that you know and love has been totally obliterated. Now, Beta Ray Bill doesn't know the story of Galactus, right? And that's where the story gets relatable, right? Because people usually have a tendency to do that. People kind of jump to conclusions and then never take the time to understand the other side, right? So they kind of assume they understand and they have all the facts when they never really had them all in the first place, right? And that kind of arrogance, hubris, is really what Beta Ray Bill was operating with, right? He was operating under the assumption that Galactus was just some malevolent force going out there and just destroying all things, that he was operating under emotion, right? He was just angry and he was upset, and that kind of a thing. And beings get stupid when we get emotional. And so Galactus really chimes in and says, no, I understand exactly where you're coming from. I can never recreate my own people. I can never recreate the world that I come from because it would create an imbalance. If Galactus did that, say for example that he recreated his people on some world out there, then he would create an imbalance in the universe. Living Tribunal steps in and says, destroy that or I destroy you. So Galactus would not only have a momentary version of happiness, but he would lose it all. At the same time, even if he could never be a part of that world. He hungers for all eternity. From now until the end of the universe, he will hunger and have to consume life-sustaining worlds. So even if he did recreate that, it would be like Superman in the bottled city of Kandor. He can never really be a part of it. And so because of that, it's kind of this torment of Galactus that he can never go back to the way things used to be. But what he tells Beta Ray Bill is, your people are not completely dead, right? Everything that dies becomes part of a greater whole. Their essences still exist out there. And so what he ends up doing is basically recreating one of the members of Beta Ray Bill's group, right? And basically brings her in. And when Beta Ray Bill shows back up on the peak to meet back up with Sword, he of course tells Abigail Brand, this is T. Asha Ra. You guys probably remember her as the chick that Peter Quill was flirting with in Guardians of the Galaxy. So she's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She's just not a Corbinite, but she's brought in by Beta Ray Bill. And it's the idea that the two of them working together can kind of repopulate the Corbinite population. It doesn't happen, but they could have. It gets kind of weird. I think she's around for like a little while and then she dies in like one of the Journey into Mystery stories, I think. She's not really important and I don't think you ever really see her again. It's kind of weird. Anyway, yeah, so that's the story. Beta Ray Bill Godhunter. I thought it was pretty cool. I always thought it was an interesting story. There's definitely some weak points in there. There's some plot holes, which I'm sure a lot of you guys will probably point out, but it was cool. Like I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of interesting. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace. Okay, I want to give a shout out to Kyle B, David Joseph, Ben, John H, AJ, Matt N, Jeff R, John H, Lean and Mean, which is an awesome name, Jason C, Austin S, Austin H, Joey M, Steven Z, Austin B, Adam K, and Genosis 916. Remember guys, you can send me messages and I'll run off whatever your message is at the end of the video, so long as there's nothing crazy. But if you want to put a message in there, send me an email, rob@robertjefferson.com. And if you're one of these people who gets shout outs, then I will tack it in there. And yeah, thanks for watching guys. Thank you.